What's up, everybody? Tom Pelissero here with Judd Zulgad on Monday. 6 days until the regular season opener, Judd, for the Minnesota Vikings. Let's just go through really quickly, now that we've been through a couple of the waiver periods here, position by position on the Vikings roster, and let's talk about what we think here. First of all, at the quarterback position, the obvious surprise, Sage Rosenfeld's not back. Clearly, McLeod Bethel-Thompson has a lot of ability. He has more natural arm talent than maybe anybody I've ever seen in the NFL, other than a couple of guys. But you still have to be surprised when they've guaranteed the money to Rosenfeld, because clearly something changed. Rick Spielman told us yesterday it was a matter of McLeod Bethel-Thompson coming up, but there still had to be a lot that went into that.
I've been giving this a lot of thought, and I've come up with a theory on it. Here it is. They like Joe Webb personally. They like him as an athlete. They have no faith in him as the long-term backup quarterback for this team. So the feeling is if something happens to Christian Ponder, they are developing a legitimate, in their minds, number 2 quarterback in McLeod Bethel-Thompson. I think they came to the realization during this training camp that Joe Webb is what he is. Really good athlete. In short spurts, if he's not game planned for, he can be very effective. But I think what they've done is they've decided, hey, we're going young. We might as well go completely young. If something were to happen to Christian Ponder, McLeod Bethel-Thompson would be potentially the long-term solution.
I don't think Sage Rosenfeld settling that ball 5 yards out of bounds when Devin Aromashadu was running against blown coverage helped him out either. If you were looking at that, I mean, throughout the offseason, we were at the OTAs and the minicamp. McLeod Bethel-Thompson always made a couple throws every practice, made you go, wow. The fact that he fit the ball into those windows. Sage didn't really do that, but you also look at the numbers. Sage was Sage. He was effective. He was efficient.
Right, but as much as the fact they guaranteed him $500,000 and the fact that we all know that Rick Spielman likes Sage a lot, does Sage really fit the profile of what this team is doing?
No.
I think making the move to stick with those 3 quarterbacks, and in my mind, Webb is only number 2, like I said, short term. McLeod Bethel-Thompson is actually the long-term number 2 guy. I think that sticks with the Spielman philosophy that he has sold to the Wilfs is we've got to tear it down, we've got to get really young.
The running back position, I said it. You can go all the way back. Did I say Matt Asiata?
You're a genius.
From
You did.
way back, actually from last year's camp.
Preseason game number 1.
He's a guy who does a lot of things well. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. He can block a little bit. And he's a really good one-cut zone runner. The question on him has never been talent. It's been about the injuries. He's always been a little bit nicked up. He had a hip strain last year, broke his leg in his first college game. His final season, or his senior season at Utah, he tore his ACL in the same leg. Had to get another year of eligibility. He's 25 years old, but I was impressed with him. No real surprises to me. As much as people liked Jordan Todman, the tackling on that 76-yard touchdown run was abysmal by the Houston Texans. He hasn't been healthy. He sat on San Diego's practice squad all last year until the Vikings claimed him in the last week. They slide him through to the practice squad. That group makes a lot of sense to me.
And Jordan Todman was one game. He got hurt early in training camp, hurt that ankle, and that was it. The other thing with Asiata where I think he fits in with this offense is what can he play? Running back, fullback. He can sort of serve in this hybrid role that Musgrave likes. And I think what he brings to this offense potentially, once again, long-term probably, but potentially intrigues the Vikings far more than a straight-up guy like Todman. Because remember, if you keep Todman, then you've got Peterson, Gerhardt, Todman. It falls in line with sort of what the Vikings have done in recent years. Asiata gives them a little bit of a guy who can make a difference not only as a running back, but also can play fullback. Would not be surprised, by the way, if Jerome Felton is not around here for a long time.
I think Felton actually is going to stick. I think that he'll be here for a while. We'll end up seeing how that pans out. But the other thing to remember, too, is with Peterson's health, what has Frazier always said? It's always, we don't need a third down back. We need another every down back. Jordan Todman fits the third down profile. He's really quick. Teams didn't have a ton of tape on him. That's the other thing. They probably felt pretty comfortable they could slip him through waivers because he didn't do anything until that last week, and a lot of decisions around the league are made prior to that week. The receiver position, they ended up going one deeper. In my 53 projection, I was not. I didn't actually think that they were going to keep a 5th guy in addition to Jerome Simpson. But what that came down to, probably Jarius Wright's ankle. They can't be entirely certain that they would have a 4th receiver available in that first game. So they hang on to Stephen Burton. I think the clock is ticking on Stephen Burton, and he's got to be able to come out and make a couple of plays for him when he's given the opportunities.
Does this receiver position, what you have right now, even throw Jerome Simpson back in the mix, but he's out the first 3 games? Do you have any faith in this group as a whole? I mean, Percy Harvin...
With Simpson, with what they asked him to do, Simpson and Harvin
but I'm just saying...
Michael Jenkins out there in week 1 because he was taking the first rep today, not so much.
I'm just saying, the receiver position to me for the Vikings is another indication of where this team is at and the fact they're rebuilding and the fact that 2012 has nothing to do with really, really trying hard to win football games. This receiver core is very much a work in progress. You do have Percy Harvin, but after that, you got a lot of question marks. And even Simpson, as we've talked about, 1-year deal, right? So Simpson is a guy who is looking to get a payday by playing well this year here. If that happens, that's great. But still, I look at this receiver core and I see huge question marks.
Tight end position, they go 4 deep there. I thought that they were going to go 3. They keep Allen Reisner around, who has flashed, but he's flashed for 2 years
Great
here
hands.
in practice. I think he's only got 1 NFL catch so far in relatively limited exposure. Red Ellison, that's the guy who, if Felton starts losing some snaps, it's going to be to Red Ellison because they'll play him some in the backfield. Interested to see, too, how John Carlson performs early on. That's another reason to keep Allen Reisner around. They're not 100% certain. I thought maybe they'd slide Reisner through the practice squad. I expect Carlson to be up on Sunday.
Sure.
Whether his conditioning, the little things in the offense, the rhythm and timing with Christian Ponder, all those are question marks right now for Carlson.
And is John Carlson also becoming a guy who just long-term you look at and say, can he stay healthy, period? Not just the knee, but he was out all last season. Is he? No, but
freak things, though. I mean, I don't know that it's...
I realize that, but at some point in time, freak things
he
begin to
played
add up.
every game his first 2 seasons.
But at some point in time, freak things begin to add up, and you do have to ask that question. But you're right with Reisner. He's a guy, they love his hands in practice. Last year in training camp, we both sat there and watched
He's
this
a guy who always flashed.
And he made a ton of catches. Can he do it in games? And here's the other thing. Will they give him the opportunity? Because now there's absolutely no reason with where these Vikings are at right now not to give a guy like that some opportunities.
My 3 guys to watch in camp last year, like 2 weeks into camp, were Allen Reisner, Matt Asiata, and some BS defensive tackle who's not here anymore. Offensive line, they claim one guy, Mark Asper, on waivers from Buffalo. They put in a claim for one of the guys the Indianapolis waived on Saturday. Didn't get him because he was awarded to the Rams. Very clear they still don't feel 100% comfortable with their depth at that position. No surprise they moved on from Pat Brown because Pat Brown, as much as he has some talent, he was on 3 different 53-man rosters in his first season. There's people around the league who look at him. He looks like an offensive tackle, but you take 2 penalties and you should have been flagged for 4 in the final game in addition to not playing very well. They had to move on there. And DeMarcus Love, another season on scholarship because he's about to undergo pectoral surgery.
And Asper does what? He brings some versatility, too. He can play some center. He can play some guard.
And he's 26 years old, which is actually, they view it, and other people, scouts around the league, would view that as a positive thing because offensive linemen to physically mature, you're into your late 20s before you do that.
He is a Mormon kid, right? Served the Mormon mission.
Really
so
interested spent 2 years away.
2 years
That's
away.
why he's a little bit older. He's a 26-year-old rookie. Interested to see what happens at right guard. They were not 100% satisfied with what they got from Brandon Fusco. They do still have Jeff Schwartz on the 53. And Schwartz get in. He told me he was full go today. That's a guy to watch here. How does Fusco perform? Does he play disciplined football? Because that's been a problem for Brandon Fusco in the past. And also, how does Jeff Schwartz come along? This could be a situation where Schwartz starts to work in at some point.
But this is also a situation where if you're ever going to play Fusco, if you're ever going to give him a chance, this year is the year to give him that
That's
chance.
why he'll start from day one. He always was going to start from
and
day
if you
one.
remember, Anthony Herrera had the exact same problem as Fusco at one time. Herrera was known as a talented kid, but he got basically too excited. He got too emotional at times. He had to calm himself down.
That was all he had, though, because he was physically just a scrapper. He had to play with that attitude. That's how he made his career.
But what I'm saying now, a guy like Fusco needs to be worked in. They need to give him a chance now because this is the year. If you're going to find out, they need to find out what they have. This is the year to find out what you have at positions like that.
The specialist, no surprises, Blair Walsh was what they expected. Defensive side of the ball. On that defensive line, I thought Nick Reed was going to stick around just because he had been pretty productive outside of completely blowing the contain on that Colin Kaepernick 70-odd yard touchdown run. I thought he had played pretty well, but they also clearly came to the realization it's tough to get that extra guy on the field. Remember last year they hung on to a guy named Adrian Owasam for a week or 2 early on in the season, had to cut somebody else in order to keep him on the roster. They ended up realizing there's no point in keeping around another veteran end. They ended up letting him go. This year they'll roll with 8 plus a couple on the practice squad.
And the thing about the defensive line, too, is we can talk about Alan Williams' rotation system or the hockey run, whatever you want to call it. Yes, the Vikings for years have liked to go in waves with their defensive linemen, but you're only going to take Jared Allen and Kevin Williams off the field so much. You're
they
not
need
going
to be off the field more, and Robinson needs to be off the field more, too.
They do, but my point is you're not going to get them all off the field all the time.
Right.
Their idea of what the rotation should be and Jared Allen's idea of what the rotation should be are going to be very different things. So at some point in time, when you do look at these roster spots, it makes sense to say, okay, here's the number we're going to keep. We don't need to keep the extra guy on the defensive line because he's not going to play.
You know who really blended in during camp was Everson Griffin. Throughout the whole preseason, can you think of anything Everson Griffin did that really jumped out at you? Now, granted, they worked him at linebacker for about 2 weeks before they realized that was a bad idea. Then they move him back to end. Griffin's also a moody guy. I think that it's perhaps harder for a guy like that to get up during the preseason than it is during the regular season. That's just one of the flaws. That's the reason he was a 4th-round pick and not a 1st or 2nd-round pick in that draft. But now, where do those backup end spots and even the nickel pass rushing spots go? Because they got a bunch of guys from DeAndre Reed, Christian Ballard, and Everson Griffin who they were waiting to see if one of those guys was going to flash in the preseason.
Did Christian Ballard flash you at all?
No, none of those guys did.
I think that Griffin is the type of guy who will come and play on Sundays, and I think you're going to have to accept that. It's that simple. He's a kid that when he's gotten opportunities on Sundays for the most part has played pretty well, but you're right. In practices, in preseason games, he does very little. But of those three guys right there, Griffin is the one guy that I would have confidence with when it comes to game day will actually play pretty well for you.
Linebacker spot, they went one deeper than I thought they would too, going with 7, but I think that was perhaps a product of Marvin Mitchell spraining an ankle. Yep. Leslie Frazier said today he's in the most danger of those guys who didn't practice today of not being ready for the opener, and that leaves you thin if one of your linebackers goes down. They were already thin on depth, but Marvin Mitchell was the clear number 4 guy. If any of those 3 were to get hurt, Mitchell would have been the first one in. Now it's Tyrone McKenzie, maybe?
Yeah, who's a good special teams player.
He's played in about three regular season NFL games in a 3-year career.
And Jasper Brinkley will start in the middle on Sunday, and we'll find out. You know what? Jasper Brinkley in the first 2 preseason games to me was ineffective. It scared me a little bit what they'd get from him. 3rd preseason game, I thought he played pretty well. Obviously didn't play in the 4th one, but that to me is just instrumental. How well he can play, how much he has really come back from that hip surgery, and really just as comfortable now playing in the system. When it gets to the regular season games, that's going to be incredibly important to me, how Jasper Brinkley holds up and how he plays.
He played a lot better in that San Diego game, but we still haven't seen him play 70 snaps in a game. He actually probably won't play 70. He'll probably play 40 snaps in a game to pull him off the field in nickel. Secondary, a couple surprises there as well. Chris Carr being released. They complete a trade for A.J. Jefferson. Mm-hmm. They keep Andrew Sendejo over why am I blanking on his name? Eric Frampton. I don't know why I was starting with his name.
Who's been around here for about 18 years.
Yeah, 5 years as a core special teams guy. In all those cases, though, you had them going with the younger guy. Jefferson's 24. Sendejo is probably 24, 25 years old as well.
Fits the model.
They all fit into that sort of a mold. Really will be interesting to watch now, because why did they bring in Chris Carr? It was always to have that veteran option they could bring in if something happened to somebody, and also if the young guys weren't ready to play in the nickel. Well, now he's gone. So now A.J. Jefferson's played some in the league.
Sure.
Josh Robinson has had a great camp when he's been healthy, but he hasn't been healthy. He had the hamstring injury, then he had the concussion.
Yep.
How long can that guy stay on the field? Is his body ready to take the pounding at the NFL level?
Hey, Tom, if Sage Rosenfels played well and got cut because simply the Vikings were going with a youth movement, Chris Carr got cut, though, because he didn't have much left. I mean, Chris Carr
didn't play well in the preseason.
No, and he didn't play well last season.
Especially.
He didn't play well last season in Baltimore, and he got hurt. And he was a guy that I thought flat out got himself cut. Sage Rosenfels did not get himself cut. Sage Rosenfels is a victim of circumstances, and I have no problem if that's the direction the Vikings are going, which it is. But Chris Carr was a guy that you watched, and I think a lot of people said this guy simply didn't make the team.
Your starting safeties are Harrison Smith and
Mr. Raymond, I think.
I think that's probably based on what they. I'm not
safety.
convinced they have a second starting safety on the roster. I think that we saw more from Raymond than we did from Jamarcus Sanford. It looks exactly the same as he has in years past.
He's not. For
being a guy who's supposed to be a physical box safety, he doesn't tackle well.
He's a good special
and that becomes
player.
an issue. Andrew Sendejo, another guy to watch, though. I mean, we were surprised when Hussein Abdullah was the one who jumped in there. Sendejo's the name that was dropped in a bunch of times by Leslie Frazier through this preseason. It's clear they like him. They kept him around.
We were shocked by that. But I think right now, if you looked, Raymond started at the end of last season, started the last half of last season, right? Started about 6 games last season. He's a guy I think is going to start, and I like Harrison Smith. I like what they're doing there. I don't have, you know what? When I looked at these cuts, yeah, this is a very young team now, but it does hold true with what Rick Spielman has basically said was his philosophy from the outset. My only question, I'll go back to it, is what's Les Frazier been told that he needs to do to keep his job? Because victories can't be it. If victories are it, he's done.
Well, I can tell you this, you can't start 0-2. For the sake of the team,
in
order to set your season on the correct path.
What happens to the locker room if they're 1-3? Because you got Winfield, Jared, Kevin Williams. I mean, what are they telling these guys as far as what the expectations are?
Right.
And by the way, with the trade deadline being moved back, I know trades don't happen a lot in this league, but if you are, let's say you've won 2 games at the trade deadline, which
there's
I think
a bunch of guys on this team that you could look at and say perhaps they'd be in the mix.
We'll get some draft picks for Antoine, or we'll get a draft pick for Antoine. Could you say that?
Yeah, and there are teams that are way under the cap, too. You look around the league, there's teams like the Eagles, who even though they have a high cash spend, have $20-odd million in cap space, so they could take on a big salary.
But, we all look at this schedule. A lot of people look at it and say the Vikings schedule, it's not that hard, it's easy, and I contend every other team they're playing says the exact same thing. And you got to wonder, with that deadline being pushed back for trades, if somebody's agent goes to Rick Spielman at some point and says, look, my guy wants to win, he's 31, 32, whatever, do him a favor.
Yeah.
Trade him.
Flip side of the coin, you win those first 2 games, your season becomes interesting.
Do you see that happening?
They're not a playoff team, I don't think. But if you start off 2-0, I don't know. I think you should win those games. You definitely should beat Jacksonville at home, and a game against Indianapolis on the road with a rookie quarterback, granted a very good one, or a guy at least has played really well in the preseason, and Andrew Luck. That's a coin flip game to me. You start 2-0, your season can go multiple ways. You at least can be competent and competitive to the midseason point. You start 0-2 with San Francisco and Detroit in your next 2 games, we're going the same direction we were before.
Oh, exactly. And to me, that's where the locker room dynamic comes in.
Yeah.
You know, Jared Allen, Kevin Williams, Antoine Winfield, all the veterans, Percy Harvin, they've all said the right thing so far because no athlete is geared to say, we're awful. We're going to just be awful. But when things start to go south, inevitably 1 or 2 guys starts to say, what are we doing? 6-10, 3-13, the same BS over and over again. That's when it potentially gets really interesting at Winter Park. And we'll be here for it.
He is Judd. I'm Tom. Full Vikings coverage from both of us, as always.
Hartford Whalers, baby.
And the Hartford Whalers at 1500 ESPN.com. Happy Labor Day.